All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to the forum for the Burlington Housing Needs Assessment. We're really happy to have you all joining and taking time out of your Tuesday evening. We're happy to have you here because we have a packed agenda for you this evening. For the next 90 minutes, we're going to do kick off with some brief introductions and then share the needs assessment project details and get into our initial data findings. We're going to have some different opportunities for you all to engage with us through the presentation. This will include polling questions, some small group discussions later. So we are really looking forward to interacting with you this evening. We hope you enjoy the forum and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. We do want to note that the meeting is being recorded, so you probably had a little pop-up when you joined us this evening. This is so that we can record the video and then put it on the project webpage for folks who can't attend in person. And we're here tonight because the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee has hired MAPC and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to help them with this project. We're co-hosting the meeting. The Burlington Housing Partnership Committee is comprised of the community members shown here on the screen and town officials. The town has hired us as the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to work on the project. I'm Andrea Harris-Long, and I'm a planner with MAPC. I'm joined with Alex Koppelman, who's co-project manager on the project with me, and Courtney Lewis from our team has joined to help us facilitate the meeting. A little bit about MAPC before we get going. So we're a regional planning agency for the greater Boston area. We support the 101 cities and towns shown on the map here. And our goal is really to help advance smart growth planning goals and regional collaboration across the region. We provide technical assistance in a variety of planning areas. And so before we get into the presentation, I'm going to turn things over to Carrie Donahue, who's the vice chair of the Housing Partnership Committee, to give a little bit of background on why the town is doing this work and why they hired us.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, everyone. As Andrea said, my name is Carrie Donahue. I'm the vice chair of the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee. And I've had the privilege of working with MAPC on the housing needs assessment since last summer. I've been on this for a while. I'm really pleased to see so many members of the community here tonight because I think this is a really important conversation for Burlington to have, and it's the right time for us to be having it. I'll be pretty quick so that MAPC can dig right into sharing with you the data that they've compiled. But as many of you know, our committee partnered with MAPC on this project because there was a strong feeling in town that our housing was becoming increasingly unaffordable. For people who already live here, people who would like to live here. But everyone was basically struggling to find somewhere to live, find both homes that they could buy and rent. And so we as a committee wanted to have data to understand what's happening and so that we could make smart decisions going forward. So the assessment has been very much a data-driven process, but it's been augmented with qualitative data as well. So we've held focus groups with residents over the last few months. We've also conducted an online survey that we have people fill out. Tonight, we just want to hear from even more residents as a final step in the project to get your thoughts and perspectives on housing in Burlington to help shape the final report that'll come out this summer. I do want to say quickly, though, that one thing I've learned through this process as I've seen the data and had the benefit of listening in on the focus groups is that this assessment is key in helping us move forward as an equitable community. In a lot of ways, our town is making great strides on that front. But if we want Burlington to be a welcoming and inclusive community, housing might not seem like an obvious piece of that puzzle, but it's actually a really critical part of it. More than ever, there is no one size fits all for housing. And one of the themes that's really come out of this process is that for our town to be inclusive, our housing has to be inclusive as well. There are so many different family types and family sizes and multiple generations living under one roof, young people and seniors living alone, different budgets, different types of jobs, preferences about housing, that if you want a diverse community, diverse housing is part of that. And so I really hope that tonight's presentation and the conversation that we have after it will help people kind of connect the dots on that and really keep it in mind moving forward so that we can continue to sort of improve as a community. So I've had a lot of fun working on this. It's been really eye-opening. So I'm excited for everybody to hear what I've been able to learn over the past few months. So I'll hand it back to Andrea.
Thanks, Carrie. I think that's a great introduction, and we hope that you all can learn a little bit more about housing in Burlington through the data that we've collected. So before we get too into things, just to remind folks, we have kind of a few ground rules that we like to establish whenever we're going into our virtual forums. We know housing is a really personal subject for many people. We want to make sure that everyone tonight has an opportunity to share their thoughts and perspectives. And we want to be respectful of one another and respect the limited time we have in this call. And lastly, your input is really important and it's valuable to the project. We hope that you can give us your undivided attention for the next 90 minutes. We know it's a lot of information we're going to be throwing at you, but we hope that you enjoy it and can fully engage over the next little bit. One of the logistical things we wanted to point out, so we will be using the Zoom chat box as kind of a virtual comment box for the evening. So as we go through our presentation, we'll be sharing a lot of information. If you have any questions, we encourage you to put those in the chat box. You can do that by clicking the little icon at the bottom of your screen. Share any questions that you have about the data after each section. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And then also share your thoughts or insights about the data, because at the end of this, we're going to compile all of that information that you all put in the chat box, and that can really help to inform the end needs assessment. So before we get into the fun data part, we did want to see who's in the virtual room with us this evening. We have a demographic poll that Alex is going to launch, and this really helps us to make sure that attendance tonight can compare with the overall Burlington population, that we have good representation, and then also see where we may want to do some targeted outreach in the future. So I think, Alex, did you want to pull up that poll?
Yeah, I believe I have launched it. Can you see it?
I don't think I can because I'm sharing the screen, but if Courtney or someone else can.
It looks like folks are starting to fill it out now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Be sure to scroll down. There's 6 questions, just FYI.
About half have filled out the poll.
All right, maybe give it another 30 seconds. And then thank you for those of you who are filling that out. It's really helpful. It's all anonymous information, but just helpful for us to kind of see who we're reaching. And then we can get into things. Did you close the poll, Alex? I can't see it.
Yeah, we'll give people 3 more seconds and okay, so we'll close the poll and that's great. I think we're ready to move to the next section.
All righty, so now I'll let Alex tell you a little bit about the project.
Thanks, Andrea. And as Andrea mentioned earlier, my name's Alex Koppelman. I'm a regional housing and land use planner with MAPC. So I've been working on housing in the greater Boston area, assisting local communities for about 3.5 years now. And it's been a pleasure to be a co-manager with Andrea on this project to support the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee in their efforts to understand housing needs in the community. So what is a housing needs assessment? So this is a comprehensive set of data where first we're looking at community demographics like population, changes in different demographic trends, the number of households, income, race and ethnicity, all of those different parts of a community's demographics. And then we look to see how that relates to the housing stock that's available, to see if there's an alignment there or maybe some gaps in terms of how the community looks and how it's changing and how the housing stock looks and how it's growing. And then we focus on the housing market and how affordable it is for those in the community or those who could have the opportunity to live in Burlington as well. So a lot of this is quantitative data, but we also are using qualitative data through focus groups and engagement like this to hear from the public, as we know that numbers can say a lot, but people who live in the Burlington community really understand it. And so we're very excited to gather some more qualitative data with you here tonight. And then moving forward, I'll just tell you a little bit about the data sources. We have several that have been included. We have some data from the latest decennial census in 2020, but really the richest data sets come from the American Community Survey, where we can really dig into different aspects of demographic data and housing stock data. So that's really the best source of information. And we also have some information from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, CoStar data, Warren Group data, as well as some census spatial data. And we have been using this data to get a sense of housing needs, obviously. And what we've also done is we've established some context communities based on different areas of the data where Burlington is similar in some respects. And so we went through a whole process to establish some communities that have similar demographic and housing stock and housing affordability characteristics. And so you'll see some of these communities represented throughout the project here in our presentation. And what this does is it just gives us a sense of where Burlington is in reference to some of its peers. We're not here to say that Burlington is like any other community. It's a unique town, but we do feel it's beneficial to just see some information from other communities to give us a reference point. Now, a lot of our data is ACS data, so some of the really deep data sets we're getting into smaller sample sizes, which does make it a little bit more difficult to look at some things like disparities between underrepresented groups, but we hope to fill those gaps with engagement like this. So here are those context communities that I mentioned. You'll see them used throughout the report. And like I said, these were established based on similar characteristics in these different areas of data listed there on the left. And then to tell you a little bit about the planning process. So Andrea and I have been hired by the town to provide technical assistance for the project. We also have the support of town staff, and Carrie, who was speaking earlier, leads the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee. But really the committee is the one that is stewarding the process. We bring the committee the data, we bring the committee the analysis, and the committee is really the one who's making the decisions, guiding the process, and giving us key local insights. So through this relationship, we're analyzing data. We're conducting outreach like the event tonight and the focus groups that we've held. And we're also gathering some personal housing stories, as we understand that, this is data, but every one of those numbers is a person. And so we really want to draw into how do these housing issues affect people in the community. And essentially we'll be culminating all this information into a report. And then if you take a look here at the project timeline to give you a sense of where we're at, we've been at this since last December. And so we were using the latest data that was available then, and we've been gathering information throughout the process. We're holding 5 committee meetings. We've held 3 focus group meetings that occurred in March. And we're having our townwide event here tonight. And then working through the summer, we'll be taking everything that we've learned and creating some messaging materials so that we can really create awareness of what we've learned through this process, so the community understands what the housing needs are, and that we can get that message out to as many people as possible. And then in July, we expect to have a final report that will be available to the public. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Andrea, who's going to start us off with a fun little housing trivia.
Thanks, Alex. So, there's only so many ways to make data in a virtual setting fun. So one of those ways that we've tried to do that tonight is to incorporate some trivia questions along the way. It's kind of a fun way to share different housing concepts and data. We don't expect that you'll know all of the answers. Hopefully you don't, and that's why you're here, to learn some things tonight. And the poll or the trivia questions are completely anonymous, so don't worry if you don't know the answer. We hope that you just can have some fun with it. So I think the first question is about a housing concept. So when a home is considered affordable, according to the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, what does that mean? Does it mean when a home is subsidized by the government, when the home costs no more than 30% of a household's income, when the home costs no more than 50% of a household's income, or when the home is free? So I think, Alex, you have launched the poll.
Yeah, we've launched the poll. We've got some answers rolling in already. About half the folks have filled this one out. So just give the rest of the room a little time to take their best guess.
Fantastic, thank you. And again, I can't see the results, so you're gonna have to help me
I'll let you
navigate
know.
that.
We're pretty close. We're about 3/4 of the way through the room.
Fantastic.
Okay, just waiting on a couple more. Say we'll give everyone 3 more seconds. 1, 2, 3. All right, final answers. All right, I'm going to share the results here. Looks like the majority of folks said B. Andrew, you want to tell them how they did?
Yeah, good job. We have a smart bunch. So the correct answer is in fact B. A home is considered affordable when it costs no more than 30% of a household's income. This threshold is important because there are several other household expenses that we consider. If you spend no more than 30% of your income on housing, then that means that you definitely have money to spend on those other necessities like food and healthcare, transportation, other kind of miscellaneous expenses. And if a household is spending more than 30% of their income on housing, then that's what we consider cost burdened. So these are two really important concepts that we'll talk about later on in the night, and that housing professionals use to make sure that housing needs are being met in communities. So we have one other question. The next one is about housing terminology. So which of the statements about lowercase a affordable housing and capital A affordable housing are true? Lowercase affordable housing is market rate housing that's affordable. Capital A affordable housing is required to be affordable. Both types of housing cost no more than 30% of a household's income, or all of the above.
All right, folks are starting to answer this one. And we're about halfway through the room. All right, 3/4 of the room has answered. Give you 3 more seconds. 1, 2, 3. All right, final answers. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And here are the results. So the majority said D, all the above. Andrea, what's the answer? Oh, it's D.
That's right. Okay, this is great. So the answer is all of the above. So all of these things are true. That lowercase a affordable housing, that's market rate housing, that's affordable. We also call this naturally occurring affordable housing. These are things that are, you know, maybe older or just more affordable. You can afford them and not be paying that more than 30% of your income. The capital A affordable housing, this is what's deed restricted. There's legal requirements in place that make sure that these are affordable units that are not requiring or cost more than 30% of a household income. So again, we'll talk more about these concepts and terms later on, but we wanted to introduce them now. So now we'll get into the data, the fun part. As a reminder, if you have any questions or thoughts about the data as we're going through, please add those to the chat box. And then at the end of each of the 3 sections, we'll try to answer your questions. And then I also want to note, we know that this is a lot of information and it's a lot to take in. We're going to be putting these slides on the webpage after tonight, so you can go back and review and kind of take it in a little bit more. And then we'll be kind of moving quickly. So hopefully you get a lot out of the data that we have to share this evening. So we're going to start with looking at the community demographics, and this is how we really can understand the Burlington community and who lives there. So this chart shows Burlington's population growth since 1990. The town's population has increased by about 13% to be just above 26,000 people in 2020. And this equates to about 10,001 total households. The census breaks down households by different types. Here we are looking at family versus non-family types. Non-family households are one-person households or unrelated roommates. And you can see that family households have been steadily increasing over the last few years, while there wasn't as much growth from 2010 to 2019 for those non-family households. And this kind of information is really useful when we're considering the different housing stock needs and what's available for the different types of households. This slide and graph shows that Burlington's average household size. So Burlington's average household size is 2.76. It's a little larger than those context communities that Alex mentioned early on, and Massachusetts as a whole. Owner-occupied homes have a slightly larger household size than renter-occupied households at 2.91, and renter-occupied households are at 2.33 people. And we want to look at the renter household size a little more closely, because if you look at this graph, this is showing that the renter household size average is larger than the context communities in Massachusetts as a whole. And this was one of those data points that we asked our focus group participants about, why might Burlington have larger renter households? And some folks said that they know of many multi-generational families who are living in rental units, and that may be attributing to why it's slightly larger average than other places. And just looking at these household sizes, it can really help us to understand, how the existing housing stock is meeting people's needs. Next, we took a look at the housing tenure. So this is what share of households are homeowners versus renter occupied. And in Burlington, 69% of the units are owned, about a quarter are rented, and 6% of homes are vacant. Nationally and regionally, we know that there are racial disparities in homeownership whenever we look at that subset of the tenure. We looked at Burlington's housing tenure by race. That's what this graph is showing. And it's really interesting to note that 3/4 of white residents own their home compared to only a quarter of the Black residents in Burlington. And if you look at this chart across all of the racial groups, it's clear that people of color in Burlington are much less likely to own their homes. And then we wanted to look a little bit more closely at the share of homeowners in Burlington, and the racial disparity in homeownership becomes even more stark. That 84% of all homeowners are white, and only 1% of Black residents and 1% of Hispanic residents own their homes. This graph shows the change in age distribution from 2009 to 2019. Like many communities, Burlington has a sizable aging population. The key takeaways here, the share of school-aged children and middle-aged residents have dropped over the last 10 years, while young adults and aging residents have increased. And we really like to take a look at the changing age demographics, because communities need to offer housing options for people at different stages in their lives. If you think about whenever you were going through and needing different changing housing needs, there were times maybe when you wanted a rental versus when you were looking for that first starter home or a home to accommodate your growing family. In our focus groups, this was something that came up a lot. We heard about the changing housing needs as residents go through these different life stages. The two quotes here are from focus group participants. One person shared an experience of having to maintain a home as they age, and how it means working past retirement age, at least part-time, to afford these new maintenance costs. And then another person shared how they found that their starter home in Burlington years ago, but now when they have friends who are looking to move to the area, it feels like starter homes are no longer in existence in town. We looked at Burlington's population by race as part of this analysis. Burlington is slightly more diverse, with 30% non-white residents. And of those 30%, about 60% are of Asian descent. And one of the things that we wanted to point out in our focus groups was that participants shared how much they really value Burlington's diversity. One person shared that having diverse student backgrounds in the schools is really important. And another person shared that diversity was a core requirement of the town when they were looking to move to Burlington. And this was the third most prevalent theme that came up in our focus groups. So now we have another trivia question to ask about the median household income. So how much are households earning in Burlington? So I think we'll pull up the poll and see what you think. What do you think the median household income for Burlington is?
Sorry, just having a little bit of technical difficulties. I'll launch that in one moment. Okay, you should be able to answer now. All right, responses are rolling in. And almost everyone's filled this out. I'll give you 3 more seconds. All right, and here are the results. Looks like everyone was split on this one. Andrea, what is the answer?
The answer is 118,721. So, so yeah, that's the median household income. That I think is one of those numbers you probably aren't aware of unless you've been doing a lot of this data pulling. Our next question gets at, not everyone is making that much money. It's a range. So how many households in Burlington earn less than $75,000?
If you have started answering this one. Okay, we'll give you 3 more seconds to finalize your answer. 1, 2, 3. All right. So for this one, majority of folks said B. Andrea, what is the answer?
All right, I'll double that. The answer is 3,392,000 households are earning less than 75,000. So here's all of the data. So this graph shows that median household income overall, that's the yellow line that you see here and how it's changed from 2009 to 2019. And then the median household income for family households, that's the red line at the top, and non-family households, the blue line at the bottom. Remember that non-family households are single people or unrelated roommates. And you can see here that there's a pretty big disparity between family and non-family households. Family households are earning 62% more than non-family. And the median for non-family households is much lower at about 52,000. It's important to note that the household income has been increasing at a much slower rate than the housing costs. We also can look at median household income by tenure. So you see that there's another disparity between those owner-occupied homes and renter-occupied homes. Renters earn 31% less than homeowners. While renters in Burlington earn less than homeowners on the whole, they are earning more than renters in context communities. This was something that's kind of stood out in the data for us. So we asked focus group participants why this might be. Some shared that those earning higher wages might still just be having difficulty transitioning from renting to homeownership. So they're kind of staying in rental options for longer. There also, again, might be multi-generational families or just multiple families, related or not, that are sharing units. And that just means that maybe there are more people contributing to that household income. The last slide in the community demographic section is looking at what jobs exist in Burlington and how this might connect to housing costs. So there are about 45,000 jobs in Burlington. The top 3 employment sectors are professional and technical services, healthcare and social assistance, and the retail trade. Those are the red bars on this graph. The yellow box on the left takes those weekly wages that are shown on the graph and shows what some sample incomes for the different job sectors could be. Just to kind of give you an idea of what people are earning, and then think about that later on whenever we're talking about how much housing is costing in Burlington. Retail trade, which is comprised of about 12% of the local workforce, brings home about $32,000 annually. You can see the professional and technical services is at the higher end with about $163,000 annually. And then those in the healthcare and social assistance professions are averaging about $86,000. So before we move on to the next section, we know that was a lot to throw at you. I'm curious if there were any questions that we could answer before we move on to the next section.
So Andrea, we didn't get any questions in the chat, but if someone does have a question, please do type it into the chat and I'll let Andrea know at the end of the next section.
All right. I actually think that we got some that just got sent to me directly. So I might have to change that setting, Alex. It looks like we might have a question about how household income is calculated. And the household income is something that's a self-reported data figure. So the American Community Survey through the census sends out a survey and people can report their household income. So it may or may not be taking into things into account like assets or the value of house or wealth of people's assets. All right. So our next section is looking at the housing stock. So what kinds of housing units are in Burlington? 65% of Burlington's homes are single family detached. 19% of units are what we would consider middle housing, things like townhouses, duplexes, and small multifamily. 16% of units are in larger multifamily developments. We really like to hone in on this middle housing stock because that's where we see opportunities for little a affordable housing and more affordable homeownership opportunities. Missing middle was something that came up as a major theme in our housing focus groups. So here are some quotes from folks in those focus groups. We heard experiences where single parents ended up buying homes that were too big for them because things like townhomes weren't available in Burlington. Several people noted that they would like to see more accessory dwelling units or in-law suites to support multi-generational living. And lastly, one person shared that they, wanted to purchase a multifamily home and that's just not available in Burlington. We also looked at the size of Burlington's homes. So this pie chart shows the size range of the different housing units by bedroom count. 64% of units have 3 or more bedrooms. Only about 15% of units are 1 bedroom or studio spaces. And this is important if we think back to those average household sizes. This shows a potential mismatch between the stock available and the size that people actually need for their household. So we have another trivia question about median sales price. So we're curious, what do you think the 2021 median sales price of a single family home in Burlington was?
All right, the poll is launched and people are already answering. And we're a little more than halfway through. Yeah, almost everyone. I'll give you 3 more seconds. All right, and so here are the results. The majority of folks said C. Are they right?
They are. Got a smart bunch with the prices. Someone's stalking the Zillow. So yeah, the median sales price in 2021 was $697,000. So let's look at the homes that are owned and have been purchased in Burlington a little more closely. So 90% of all homes owned are single family detached. This is the most expensive type of home to purchase. And just to kind of put this into context, if the median sales price is nearly $700,000, then that means that a prospective buyer would need a down payment of nearly almost $140,000. So this really limits homeownership opportunities, especially if you're a single income household or a local worker in a sector that maybe has lower wages. This graph again shows the median sales price, but also it includes the condo prices. So single family homes are the blue bar, condo prices are the red bar. Burlington has the highest median sales price for condos of the context communities at $586,000. And even to purchase a condo, you need more than $100,000 for a down payment. So those boxes to the right show what the monthly mortgage payments might be if you're able to afford to put down the large down payment. One more graph on the sales prices. So we know that we're experiencing unprecedented growth in the housing market, both regionally and nationally. And over the last 3 years, single family home prices have increased 23%, while condo prices have increased 9%. And this growth is outpacing the wage growth, which means that more people are either becoming cost burdened or finding it more difficult to transition from renting to owning. So this was a theme that continued to come up in our focus groups, the high cost of homes. Many shared their experiences of trying to save for down payments and being outpaced by the market. The quote in the blue box shows that, this person was continuing to try to save and save and save for a down payment, but they just kept getting outpaced from the market and rising costs. Another person shared that they were finding homes that were maybe in their price range, but they still required thousands of dollars worth of work to make it fit for their housing needs. So turning to the rental stock, those units that are being currently rented, 94% of them are in multifamily developments. And we know in Burlington, many of those are newer, larger buildings that tend to be a little more expensive maybe to rent. Only 6% of single family homes are being rented. And this could mean that Burlington is lacking in family-sized rentals. Focus group participants shared how expensive those family-sized rentals with more than 2 or 3 bedrooms are. And one person shared that when they were searching for a 3-bedroom home, they were, finding things that cost $3,000 a month. Another person noted that they had to sacrifice size despite having 2 kids because they couldn't afford a 3-bedroom unit. So we know that rent is something that really constantly fluctuates, especially in the current housing market. In 2021, the average rent in Burlington was $2,418. And over the last 10 years, the average rents have increased 46% in Burlington. To give you an idea of what income would be needed to afford this average priced rental unit, a household would need to make nearly $97,000 to not be cost burdened. So not be paying more than that 30% of their income on housing. We also looked at vacancy rates for multifamily and saw that Burlington's rental market is particularly tight, especially when looking at the context communities. This graphic shows multifamily vacancy rates, and Burlington is at just under 3%, which is a pretty tight housing market and means that it may be difficult to find rental units. So one of the many factors that's contributing to the current expensive housing market is that we have just a low housing supply. And this chart shows the residential permitting activity in Burlington since 1980. You can see that there's been steady but minimal growth in single family home development and even less consistent growth in multifamily homes. Most of the multifamily development has been in the form of larger, those 40B type developments that folks may be familiar with, that those also tend to be sometimes more expensive. And a surprising fact about the permitting is that there have only been 2 duplexes permitted in the last 30 years, which is kind of mind blowing. So it just kind of shows that there's not a lot of diversity in what's being built. So the focus groups really and shared some insights about what the new developments are happening. Several people shared that the development trend occurring in Burlington that they've noticed is that smaller, more modest, older homes that have historically maybe been more naturally occurring affordable housing are being purchased, torn down, and replaced with larger, expensive single family homes, or some people call them mini mansions. So these 2 quotes just share that experience of people living in town and what they're seeing happen as development occurs. So I don't think we have any new questions. I don't know if you have any, Alex.
I did receive a question about the context communities and a little further explanation about how they were chosen. So the methodology behind this is we looked at maybe like 20 to 25 different data sets. And if a community fell within a range plus or minus, so say total population, if a community was plus 10,000 or minus 10,000, then it scores a point. And then we would go for every community through those 25 data sets. And then the communities that had the most points were the ones that were included as context communities. So you can see in some of the data sets that have been shown so far, in some cases, Burlington is higher in a different metric or lower in a different metric than the different context communities. But all of them were falling within a certain range where we felt like they would be good to include as a reference point for the data that we're analyzing for Burlington.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. Any other questions that you received?
No other questions. Just a comment from William, who says some houses should be restricted so developers cannot bid on them, only families.
All righty. I had one question that I think you'll get to in your presentation about how many 40B units developments in town. So I think we can move on to your section and then hopefully answer that with your data.
All right, that sounds good. So getting into the affordability section, we did cover this in our housing trivia, but just as a reminder, when someone says this needs to be affordable, what does that mean? It means that the house costs no more than 30% of your income. And this is so that you can afford other necessities like food, healthcare, transportation. So if you're paying between 30 to 50% of your income, if you're using 30 to 50% of your income on housing, that's considered cost burden. If you spend more than half, then that's considered severely cost burdened. As you can imagine, using more than half your income for housing can make it really difficult to afford the other things that you need. So looking at cost burden data for Burlington, we can see that this is an issue that affects a significant amount of households, as close to a third of households are cost burden, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. This is something that affects both owners and renters. You can see on the right there that we've shown of all the owners, 22% are cost burden. It is much more prevalent for renters. As you can see, of the renters, almost half in town are cost burdened. So when we're thinking about cost burden for an owner, this can make it difficult to maintain your home, to make any changes that you need to make based on how your housing needs develop over time. And as property taxes go up, all these different things that can contribute to cost burden. I also just want to mention that cost burden includes utility costs, so like how much you're paying for your heating and cooling. So all of these things factor into it. But we can really see here that renters are disproportionately cost burdened in Burlington, with almost half experiencing cost burden. And so if we go to the next slide, you can see here how this issue actually affects people's lives, forcing people to make very difficult decisions or to sacrifice other things that they would like to pursue, or in some cases, things that they need, such as paying for child support or sending their son to college, as is referenced here from our focus group meetings. Here we're digging a little bit deeper into cost burden. So really what's most significant is when a household that has less income to begin with is cost burden, because you could be very well off and still spend more than 30% of your income on housing. But when you don't have a lot of income to begin with, and then you're using so much of it to cover your housing costs, that's when it can really make an impact on your life. So this chart here, hopefully it's not too overwhelming to look at, but it's basically just showing who's cost burdened and then who's severely cost burdened, spending more than half their income on housing by different income groups. So the bottom three bars there are those who are considered low income, very low income, extremely low income, and it shows the rate of cost burden for those households. And overall, there's almost 2,000 households that are low income or have even less income than that and are experiencing cost burden. And so these are houses that we need to be thinking about. They may be susceptible to market pressures. They may be experiencing housing instability or at risk of displacement. And this data shows a clear need for capital A affordable housing that's required to be affordable, as everyone in those three bars moving down are eligible for affordable housing. So let's talk about capital A and little a affordable housing again. So here, lowercase a affordable housing, this is just market rate housing that happens to cost no more than 30% of your income. It's usually because the home is smaller, or maybe it's older. So just in the marketplace, it's meeting people's needs and it's affordable in terms of income. If you think about it like this, trying to buy a single family home and trying to buy a condo is going to be a little bit easier to buy. So it's more naturally affordable So that's why we're looking at middle A housing, as Andrew was showing earlier, is because those tend to be more affordable in the marketplace and would be considered little A affordable housing. So then the capital A affordable housing, this is housing that is required to be affordable by a deed restriction. So it's not going to cost any more than 30% of someone's income or household's income by a deed restriction. It's produced in a variety of different ways by mission-based developers, through inclusionary zoning, through a lot of different ways. But in any case, it's going to cost no more than 30% of a household's income. So with that, we'll go into our next trivia question for you, which deals with the area median income. So earlier, we were looking at the local median income. The area median income is the median household income for Burlington and the greater Boston area. So I've launched this poll if you want to submit your answers here. The reason that we're looking at this, though, is because area median income is how eligibility, so who's able to live in a deed restricted affordable unit, this is how it's decided. It's based on area median income. So about half have answered, and I'll give you about 10 more seconds. All right, just a moment to finish up. All right, so I'm gonna share the results here. Looks like the majority said B, but it was pretty much split across the board here. Andrew, do you want to let them know what the answer is? Yeah, so the area median income is $120,800. And then if you go to the next slide, we can see, oh, could you actually back up one? Okay, so I was just going to mention that the area median income is actually really close to the median income in Burlington. As you recall before, the median income for Burlington is $118,721. So these are really close. In some communities, they're much different. But in terms of determining eligibility, the area median income is close to the median income. So not really so much of an issue in Burlington as it sometimes is in other communities. So now we're going to go to the next question for you, which is how high of an income could a single person household, so this is someone who lives alone, how high of an income could they have and still be eligible for capital A deed restricted affordable housing? All right, and folks are answering now. All right, about 3/4 of the way through. I'll give you just 2 more seconds. Okay, final answers. All right, and it looks like the majority of the audience was split between C and D. Andrew, you want to let us know the answer? All right, so the answer is 70,750 because someone who's making 80% of the area median income is eligible for affordable housing. If we go to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit of the nuances in determining eligibility for affordable housing. So if you're a single person household, then the most you can make and still be eligible is 70,750. But this, if you work your way across the chart to the right, this varies by household size. So a 2-person, a 3-person, a 4-person household, the eligibility for affordable housing is going to vary. And then also, when affordable housing is built, it's made available to someone at 80% AMI who's considered low income, they're eligible, and that may be the only household income that affordable housing is made available to. Affordable housing that has deeper subsidy is available to people with less income, who may be at the 50% AMI, which is very low income, or the 30% AMI, which is extremely low income. So the majority of affordable housing is 80% AMI because it is difficult to finance affordable housing that reaches lower levels of incomes, and that would be considered more deeply affordable housing, but it's definitely a big need, as we'll see as we dig deeper into the data. So with that, the next question that we have for you is how many households in Burlington are eligible for affordable housing? So how many are earning 80% AMI or lower? And we have some answers rolling in now. All right, a little more than halfway through. Okay, and take a moment to finish your answer. All right, so with this one, most people said C. What's the answer, Andrea? And the answer is actually D. So there are 2,815 households in Burlington that are eligible for affordable housing. And so if we go to the next slide, we can take a little bit of a deeper dive into this information. So this is showing eligibility for affordable housing at those 3 different AMI levels: 80% AMI, which is considered low income, the 50% AMI, which is very low income, and the 30% AMI, which is extremely low income, all represented in those different shades of red. So you can see that 30%, just close to 30% of households overall are eligible for affordable housing, the 2,815 households from our last trivia question. But then when you look at the different shades of red in that bar, you can see that there's pretty much an even distribution of those who are eligible for really deeply affordable housing at the extremely low income level, the deeply affordable housing at the very low income level, as well as the affordable housing at the 80% AMI low income level. So really, when we're talking about capital A affordable housing, there's a need across all of those different income levels. So then if we go to the next one, we can see a little bit more from this census data about who are these folks who are eligible, what types of households are eligible for affordable housing. So the bar all the way to the left, you can see that close to 30% overall in town are eligible, as we were just looking at. But then these other bars are showing different household types where the census captures data to see who's eligible. So very clearly, seniors who live alone or with unrelated roommates have the highest prevalence of housing need in terms of being eligible for affordable housing, as 73% of seniors living alone or with roommates are eligible for affordable housing, meaning they're at the 80% AMI or lower. And then the next one is households that are led by a senior. So this could be multiple people in a household, but it's led by a senior. 36% of those households are also eligible for affordable housing. And then very close to that is also just folks who are any age but live alone or with unrelated roommates. And of that household type, 28% are eligible for affordable housing. And then we can see that there is eligibility in the large family household type, which is 5 or more people, and the small family household type, which is 2 to 4 people. Although rates are lower there, let's not forget that these are actual households. There's 660 small families that are eligible. There's 140 large families that are eligible. So this gives us a little bit of a better sense of who is eligible for affordable housing, where the need for capital A affordable housing is. So with that, we're going to go to our next trivia question, which asks, how many housing units does Burlington have on its subsidized housing inventory? We're going to talk a little bit more about what a subsidized housing inventory is, but essentially it's the state's measurement of how many affordable units each community has. So go ahead and answer this. All right, we're a little more than half the way through. And I'll give you a couple more moments, 1 moment to finish. All right. So with this one, the majority of folks said A. And Andrea, what's the answer? That is correct. So Burlington has roughly 1,300 units on its subsidized housing inventory. So if we go to the next slide, we can see how this compares to the context communities. And Burlington actually has the highest SHI percentage of all context communities at 13.5%. So just to let you know, the subsidized housing inventory is generally the amount of capital A affordable units as the numerator in this equation over the total amount of housing units in town based on the decennial census. So based on that figure and what the state takes record of, Burlington's at 13.5%. So you may also know that 40B laws, the state sets as a goal for every town to be at least 10%. And so Burlington is above that metric by the state standards. If we go to the next slide, we can look at a little bit more closely how many, what does this subsidized housing inventory actually entail? So a 40B development, which happens when a town's not at the 10% SHI or when a town chooses to use this comprehensive permitting process. In that process, if that development includes rental units, 20 to 25% are going to be capital A affordable. The remaining rental units are actually market rate and have no deed restriction ensuring their affordability. But this law was written quite a long time ago, and it was written in a way where market rate housing units in a 40B development are counted on the SHI. Burlington has had a lot of 40B developments, and so there are a lot of market rate units that are being counted on the SHI. When we remove those market rate units from the calculation, we see that there's actually far fewer actually deed restricted affordable units. We have calculated that there's 565. So then if we took that number over the total housing units in town, the percentage of affordable housing is more like 5%. So for those 2,815 income eligible households in Burlington, there's 565 deed restricted affordable housing units. So in other words, for every 5 eligible households in town, there's 1 deed restricted affordable housing unit. So to actually meet that need, there is we are calling for, to meet that need, a 2,250 affordable housing units. That's what the assessment shows would meet the need for capital A affordable housing. So I'm going to pause there before we get into the initial key findings discussion to check if I have any questions. A couple comments that we can address in breakout rooms, but I don't have any questions. Do you, Andrea?
Nope, no questions on my end.
Okay, so with that, we're going to be preparing to have a discussion about these initial housing needs assessment key findings that I'm going to go over for you now in our breakout rooms. So I'm going to go over this, and then you're going to have an opportunity to talk about it in small groups where we can unmute ourselves and really have a good discussion. So based on what we've done so far in analyzing quantitative data and through our focus group data and what we've collected through surveys, we have come to some initial key findings from the housing needs assessment that we plan to discuss with you in a moment. The first is that Burlington's existing housing stock and current, so what currently exists and what has been recently permitted in new construction needs to diversify so that there's a greater range of different types of homes to meet a broader range of housing needs. This would help sustain the town's mix of residents to ensure a vibrant and diverse community. The second is that Burlington is greatly lacking in capital A affordable housing to meet residents' needs, as we were just going over a moment ago. The next one really pertains to a lot of what Andrew was talking about in the housing stock section, where it's very difficult to purchase a home in Burlington with the cost of homes at what they are now, and with the majority of homes being detached single family homes. So this is difficult, not just for lower income households, but even for middle to upper middle income households. Access to housing in Burlington is key to fostering an inclusive and diverse community now and in the future. And this is something that we've seen evident in the disparities pertaining to housing, race, and ethnicity in our data, as well as themes from our focus group. And then the final initial key finding is that residential displacement is a concern as housing costs rise and as lowercase a affordable housing may be lost in the marketplace. And so this is something that we see when we're looking at incomes and the rise in housing costs. So these are our 5 initial key findings, but we're going to go into breakout rooms in a moment, and we're going to have a facilitator. I'm going to facilitate a room, Andrea is going to facilitate one, and Courtney's going to facilitate one, and Carrie's going to facilitate one. And then as a reminder, if you are a committee member, and you will have a committee member likely in your group, if you're a committee member, please do take notes from these small group discussions, as what everyone shares with us is really important in terms of thinking about these findings and gathering more input from people tonight. So with that, Andrea, do you want to launch the breakout rooms? All right, so it looks like we're back from our breakout room discussions. So I hope that you had a good discussion in your room. We're going to take the next few minutes to ask some polls about the initial key findings. So after having your discussions, hopefully you have a really good sense of how you feel about these initial key findings. And our first question for you, and it looks like, Andrew, you may have to launch this poll for some reason. It's saying here.
Okay. Yep. Let's see here. All right. It should be launched. So give everyone a few minutes to tell us, like Alex said, which of the key findings most resonates with you.
And this one may be a little difficult because you can only pick one, but in a moment we'll give you an opportunity to weigh in on each. But here, which one most resonates with you out of the 5?
Alrighty, we have about half of the responses in. Give folks about a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds. All right, I think we give folks one more second. All right, I'm going to end the poll and let's share the results. So it looks like about a third of folks said the first one, that the existing housing stock needs to diversify. And then the second, that we're lacking affordable housing and the home ownership and the difficulty to attain that. Those about 20% of folks said those 2 were the most resonating. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing and we can go to the next poll. So this next one, I'm going to launch it. So this is, again, there are all 5 questions. So scroll through. This is where you can give us your feedback on each of the key findings, how you feel, if it's extremely important, very important, important or not so much. And this can just help, as the town moves forward, kind of trying to hone in on what they want to focus on moving forward to address their housing needs. So give y'all a few minutes to think about this. like we have about half of responses in. Righty, do about another 5 to 10 seconds. All right, we're gonna end the poll. We have 95% participation, that's good. And share the results. So we saw for the first finding that about 60% of folks said that that's extremely important. Similarly, with the second finding, about 60% said that the affordable housing is really important. And you can see here for home ownership, access to housing, about half said this was extremely important. And about half of folks said that displacement was of a really big importance. So thank you so much for giving us that feedback. And we'll go to the next slide. So I know we're at time. So thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a fast 90 minutes, but we really appreciate all the feedback. I enjoyed talking to you in our small groups. I wanted to let you know what's the next steps for this project. So some of you hopefully participated in the housing survey that was fielded in March. So we're going to be continuing to look through those results and incorporating that and the feedback that we received this evening to finalize the final housing needs assessment report and the executive summary. And then as Alex mentioned, we're working on some informational materials to accompany the report, including a short video. And we have the project webpage here. If you are interested in following, you can also go and sign up and give us your email so you can get updates about the project and notification when the final report is done. And then lastly, if you're interested in housing and hopefully you maybe already do this, but you can join or follow the Burlington Housing Partnership Committee. Their website is here, their Facebook page is super active. So if you want to continue to be engaged in housing in Burlington, feel free to give a follow. So with that, Alex, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Just I pasted the links in the chat if you want to use them. But I would just reiterate that we're so grateful that you spent this time with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We are really eager to take what we've learned here and incorporate that into our findings and the report. And we're hoping that you'll support us as we work towards creating greater community awareness of these housing needs. If you have any questions about the project, you could email myself, Andrea, Liz, or Carrie, and we would be happy to continue this conversation with you. But with that, I would say thank you so much and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Andrea.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Courtney. Good night.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for sharing your stories and your thoughts with us.